Test 1, 2. Good. You good?
Okay.
You guys good? I call this February the 14th meeting of the Rockingham County School Board to order. Thank you all for your patience. And I want to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. Hope that you've had an opportunity to spend some time, or if you've not yet spent some time with the special one in your life. First thing we need to do is to approve tonight's agenda. Do I hear a motion in that regard?
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. I just ask that everyone will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now, if you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is recognitions and presentations. Dr. Scheichel.
February is, as it is every year, School Board Appreciation Month. And at your laptops, you also had a certificate from VSBA to thank you for your service from the Virginia School Boards Association. I also, just like every year, want to say thank you personally for the hundreds of hours you spend in conversations and discussions with each other, with staff, with me, to make the lives of students better, to improve education in Rockingham County. And it's a difficult time for board members, across the country, really. And I just want to say thanks to all the time you invest and all the effort you invest to improve education for the students of Rockingham County. So thank you for that. It is also, and this is not on the agenda, but it is also, this week is Board Clerk Appreciation Week. So Dr. Aldifer, I want to personally thank you from the bottom of my heart for your excellent work as the Deputy Board Clerk. Pam, if you're watching, thanks for all you do. We couldn't do any of this without you. And we'll certainly celebrate Pam at a different time. But today, it's Dr. Aldifer's turn, and so you are appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will move into public comments. The same rules will apply as always. There will be a 3-minute timer. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. I will tap the gavel once at the 30-second to go mark, and to try to give you some idea so that you can concentrate on what you're saying and not be so worried about the clock. Mr. Cross asked me after the last meeting if we could also include in these instructions that if you would, as you're speaking, address the board, and that's part of our instructions anyway if we get into that, but we would ask that you would do that. Let's begin with Nancy Bassett.
Chairman Breeden, school board members, Dr. Scheichel. I'm Nancy Bassett, president of the Rockingham County Education Association. And we all know that today is Valentine's Day, but many may not have realized that February is School Board Appreciation Month. So we just want to take a moment and tell you that we are thankful for all of the time and all of the extra efforts that you guys have put forth for our students and our teachers. And we have a small token of our appreciation for you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Brooke Garrison.
Thank you so much for the time. I just want to let you know that Patriots, I would like to make sure that we're asking our friends to peaceably stand up for freedom instead of asking our friends to stand down. We all understand that under the America Recovery Plan that you guys are accepting funds for universal masking, contact tracing, and promoting vaccinations. And with those funds, you have last meeting all voted yourselves in and voted the county in a 5% raise. So now I understand that you're in a conundrum. You are in a very, very awkward situation that your public that you are representing does not want the mandates that you are accepting funds for. And so with that, I'm filing a claim against your VA Corp insurance for failure for faithfully performing your duties. You are no longer representing the people that you stand for. With this claim, I'm asking you to stop unlawful masking, which you have accepted funds to do. And some of this is actually to free up time for the administration, because I understand Schleichel, I know my principal, she sent me emails trying to spend time sending kids home, denying them education for not wearing masks. I'd like you to stop contact tracing. It's failing. I've gotten notices 8 days in 10-day quarantine that my kid's supposed to be quarantined. I've gotten notices 4 days into a 5-day quarantine that my child should be quarantined after they've attended school and attended swim meets. I'm asking you to stop accepting the ESSERS 3 funds and giving staff raises with these unsustainable funds that should end in 2023. It is funding accepted to impose unlawful requirements on the students that attend Rockingham County in Virginia. I'm asking for the resignation or firing of Oscar Schleichel, and I would ask to send a letter to everyone in Rockingham County email distribution list owning your failure to perform your lawful duties. So one thing, the one that I'm going to send you, and I just want to make sure that if there's any law enforcement here that I'm going to peaceably hand them forms regarding the laws that I perceive that they are breaking and hand it to them. But the biggest one is the crime of malfeasance, where they closed the schools. They knew in May that they were going to close the schools. The CDC gave them recommendations how to keep the schools open, and in July 23 of 2020, and they still kept the schools closed. In August, they announced the schools were closed. We have had a child die in a car accident when he should have been safely at school, and you guys are still. My time is up, but you are not protecting the people that you are supposed to be representing. Please.
Just as a point of clarification, the board has not voted on any pay raises. That was a first blush look at the budget.
I hope you reflect differently on it, because that is an improper way to accept funds.
Okay, our next speaker is Chelsea Wine.
Hi, good evening, board. At some point in the meeting, I would like some clarification on the AASPA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. It kind of sounds like CRT under a different name from what I've gathered of it. I'd like a further explanation of that. And, also just to say, parents need to be let back into our kids' classrooms. I want to be an active part of my kids' class. We had 70,000 people at a Super Bowl. I should be able to go to class and read a book to my kid. Thank you.
Thank you. John Bradshaw.
Good evening. As most of you are aware, I taught in Rockingham County for 10 years. I worked with at-risk students in what we formerly called the YES program. I've worked as an alternative education teacher while also teaching social studies. There was an incident that troubled me recently because it brought back memories. In November, Ethan Crumley killed 4 people and injured several others at Oxford High School in Michigan. On a class worksheet, he had drawn a bullet, a bleeding victim, and had written dark messages. The teacher notified the administration, but after talking to the parents, he was sent back to class before carrying out his horrendous crimes. I am concerned about the disciplinary actions in Rockingham County. I don't think that is necessarily the principals that are making the call. I believe it's coming from the top. I want to believe that much of what is happening is not even reaching the school board. I'm appalled either way, but if some of the incidents have reached the board with no action, then there are some very shady things going on in Rockingham County. I've had death threats against me and know of other teachers who have as well. A student drew a picture of me with an arrow through my head and blood gushing out, only to be back in my classroom 2 days later. I know of a student with a hit list who was allowed to continue to go to school. Students sexually harassing teachers with no consequences. Students being assaulted, choked out even, and given 2 days. One incident in Montevideo left a student laying on the bathroom floor. The perpetrator was back riding the school bus with my kid the next day. Weapons being brought to school with very little consequences, 2 days home. And when asked why that is, well, it's the first time they've done anything like this. Students touched inappropriately in middle school. I've seen it myself, and nothing was done when reported to administration. And once he got to the high school, he sexually assaulted a classmate. Things are being reported by teachers and students with little or no consequences given by administration, which in turn calls teachers to stop reporting things. I think this is by design of those in central office and possibly the school board, although I think you are not informed of everything that's going on in the classrooms and in your schools. I believe in grace, but many of the crimes that happen in our schools could be prevented if we would take proper action prior to it going that far. So what do? Parents of students who share the same classroom with these violent offenders need to be informed. We need more transparency between the central office and this school board. We need to allow our principals to do their jobs and stop forcing them to sweep these incidences under the rug. And it's obvious to all the teachers what's going on. We need to listen and act upon the legitimate concerns of our teachers, show the employees of Rockingham County that you care by not just giving them a few extra days off, but support them in the classroom. We need to take care of the student body as a whole and do what is right for their safety and a proper learning environment. And we need to teach our students that certain actions will not be tolerated.
Zach Summerlin, is that correct? Yes. Thank you.
So first of all, good evening. This is my first school board meeting I've been able to make it to. My job keeps me pretty tied up. I've spent some time kind of thinking about what I wanted to say when I came up here, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write something out nice. But when I put it to paper, it really wasn't getting the point across. So I'm just going to come up here and speak from the heart to all y'all. This masking thing has got to stop. I know we voted on that last month at the meeting. We kind of had some mixed results and emotions from that. That is what it is. But if we can go to professional sporting events we can go to concerts, we can go to church and everywhere else without having to wear masks. My kids should be able to do the same thing when they come to school. There is absolutely no reason they should have to wear that dirty piece of cloth on their face while they go to school for 8+ hours a day. We moved up here from South Carolina about 2 years ago, and I was told all these great things about the Virginia school system, and I have nothing but great things to say about my kids' teachers. They do an excellent job, and the areas that my kids were struggling in South Carolina, that's been remedied. But in terms of the experience as a parent, it's been way worse up here. I think one of the bigger tragedies of this entire thing is the board has lost faith of the parents. And we feel like no matter what we say at this point, it's not going to matter. We can come here, we can speak, but no action seems to get done. And that's pretty much all I had to say.
Thank you.
Mark Flanders.
This board's continued insistence on forced masking of our children in the face of evidence that the practice is both ineffective and actually causes real harm has been nothing less than shameful. Chairman Breeden's press release last week was emblematic of the board's handling of this issue. The best interest of the kids was clearly not the focus of that press release. It was essentially a big screw you to parents. The use of fear-mongering and divisive language was disgraceful, and he basically admitted that he would not lift the board's overreaching mandate until his hand was forced. Well, thankfully, that long overdue time has come. It is an answer to our prayers that the legislature and governor have the good sense to knock overreaching school boards like this one down a peg and return at least some power to us as parents. It's unfortunate that this board didn't act before now, when your hand is finally being forced. I'm sure that as school board members, you hope to be known for what you did for the kids. Instead, you will be known for what you did to our kids. You will always be known as the board that kept our kids unmasked until the bitter end, and we parents will not forget it. With the inevitability of SB 739 being effective any day now, I would hope that all the members of this board and Dr. Scheichel can get on board and change your tune for the good of the kids that you profess to care so much about. I strongly urge you to vote tonight to make masks optional for all students and teachers effective immediately. This is the easiest and best way to move forward without sowing division or creating the additional burden of keeping track of who is opted in and who is not, or who is opted out and who is not. Teachers and administrators do not need one more thing to worry about. I also urge you to resist the temptation to make a divisive, doom and gloom statement stoking irrational fears. I urge you to focus on the positive and encourage all students and staff to be understanding and supportive of others regardless of the decision to wear a mask or not. Announce the new policy with a simple positive statement like, starting tomorrow, masks will be optional for all students, teachers, and staff of RCPS. We expect all students and staff to respect choices made by others. We look forward to seeing your smiling faces. I hope you will finally have the humility and good sense to do the right thing tonight and stop this insanity. But don't expect me to clap or cheer when you do, since you will only be ending the awful policy that you yourselves have created.
Thank you. That concludes our sign up tonight for public comments. We will next move to highlights by board members. I will begin with Mr. Falk. Thank you. Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. First of all, I'd like to talk about the unthinkable, terrible tragedy that happened at Bridgewater College on February the 1st. It was just unthinkable, and our hearts go out to the families. Our hearts go out to all the entire community. During that time, Bridgewater was locked down. 3 of our schools were locked down: Turner Ashby, Pence, and John Wayland. And I understand that the teachers and the staff did an outstanding job of keeping everybody calm and acted very professionally during this lockdown. And I would like to give a shout out to those staffs for their actions during this unthinkable, unspeakable act that happened on February the 1st. On the second item that I'd like to talk about is a happier one. The musicals at the high schools and the middle schools are beginning this week. And I urge all of you, if you have an opportunity, go to see the musicals at the high schools in the next 2 weeks, and following that will be the middle schools. You will enjoy a wonderful performance, and I know the students would be delighted to have you there.
Thank you. Dr. Scheichel?
My first highlight is the field day that we just recently had up at the farm. We had students there going through different stations, as part of the farm that we run through MTC's agriculture production program. Mike Phillips, who owns the farm with his wife, is always a good storyteller. So this time they had to say, hey, Mike, you only have 10 minutes because these kids need to get to the field day. And then I met some of his former colleagues, and they said when they had to track time with Mike and had to turn in logs, they always had this abbreviation, LTMT. And we had a good laugh around that, because what it stands for is listen to Mike talk. And so he also told us that story. And so that was, again, one of the highlights with kids being out at the farm and showing what they do there every day and every week, and what the sport makes possible. Also, shout out to Chad Edwards at Spotswood, 10 straight Valley District titles. That's quite the accomplishment. And with, I believe, a district record over that time of 99-1. So quite an amazing accomplishment for boys basketball. And then finally, a highlight involving Delegate Wilt and Senator Obenshain. So for the last 3 years, we have worked with Delegate Wilt on a way to allow mental health professionals to serve as school counselors. And there are many PLCs, professional licensed counselors, and others, social workers, psychologists, other licensed mental health providers who would like working in schools, but because the Department of Education requires that specific school counselor endorsement, that hasn't been possible. And so Delegate Wilt sponsored a bill a couple of years ago, and the Democrats at the time controlled the House, and it took a little while, and there was a lot of interaction across the aisle, and it turned into a study at that time to ask superintendents how they would like to meet these counselor ratios. And then this legislative session, I met again with Delegate Wilt and with Senator Obenshain to move that forward. And so the School Counselor Association first opposed it because, again, they focused on, of course, their counselors being endorsed. But then there was a compromise position developed that will allow not only LPCs, but social workers, psychologists, and other licensed mental health professionals to serve as school counselors with a provisional license, and will give them 5 years, way more than the normal 2 years, to earn their endorsement. And just received an email before this meeting that the bill that Delegate Wilt sponsored passed the House 99-0. So both parties, every single delegate voted for it. And so it's going over to the Senate now. Senator Obenshain has introduced it there. And so it's one of those examples where you have to say, working across the aisle and with everyone who had concerns. And after 3 years, that's only going to help our students by providing that flexibility way more than it has been ever available, because we had it for LPCs, but there was a 2-year limit. And so now it's been expanded. And I'm just grateful to both of those legislators, Delegate Wilt and Senator Obenshain, for the work that they've done to help the students that need that help and to work across the aisle and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cross?
First of all, I want to welcome everyone, all the parents and students and everyone in the community that came out here tonight and addressed the school board. It's important that you keep coming. It's important that you be involved of what's happening with your children in your schools. And for many years, I would hear from staff and employees in the school that you didn't see parents wanting to get involved and come to any type of school activities or anything involved with their kids. And now we're seeing more involvement out of parents, and I think it's due because of COVID. But I appreciate the parent input and community input that you're telling us, because we serve you as the parent and your children, and so that's important. That for me is that we serve you as parents with your kids, and we keep education in its right lane, right? So we want to keep education in its right lane, and we want to keep you as the parent over your children. So thank you for coming tonight. Dr. Scheichel stole my thunder with a highlight with Coach Chad Edwards, and so I didn't know what he was going to say, and he didn't know what I was going to say, but it's amazing. One of the things that I'm really pushing for is that to see our coaches receive a raise because they haven't had one for about 20 years. And Chad Edwards is a legend here in our school division. And really, quite frankly, I mean, working as an SRO inside the schools, I would see how important coaches are to the environment and the temperature inside the school, because you'd have a kid acting up or whatever, and the next thing you know, they take that kid down to Donnie Coleman. Donnie Coleman would take that child underneath his arms. Next thing you know, he'd be on the football team. Then he gets on the football team. He's got to make good grades. He's not getting in fights. He's not bringing drugs to school, doing things like that. And so coaches serve more than just on the basketball floor or on the football field. They serve our kids. I mean, many of these coaches even brought kids into their homes and taking care of them as well. So what coaches like Chad Edwards mean to me in the school division is big time. And so when someone like Chad Edwards leaves, it's going to be hard to fill this man's shoes. And so if you're listening to tonight, Coach, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your staff. To go as long as you have, it was a 90, 99 and 1. It's just incredible statistic. And winning doesn't come easy. You know, if you know anything about sports or anything, it doesn't come easy. It takes hard work. It takes the kids to buy into your program. And I'm very pleased and thankful for Coach Chad Edwards, and how he represents the school division on the basketball floor means a lot to me as well. He's a good coach. He's not only a good coach with the kids and parents, but he's an incredible man. And thank you, Coach Edwards, for what you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Ms. Lohr?
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Dr. McQuilkin for her kind words about the tragedy at Bridgewater College, and just share my experience with that. I happened to be at the Stockman's contest at the fairgrounds when that happened. We had over 150 students from all over the state, and a couple even from West Virginia. And the teachers immediately took over the situation, put all the kids in the main building, and never let the kids know. The kids just thought, oh, this is part of the contest, and they kept rolling with the contest. I was so impressed by the professionalism and calm that was shown by our staff, as well as Becca Holloway. I discovered how nice it is to live in a small community, because as soon as I told Becca that I'd seen this post come through, she called Jeremy Holloway, her husband, and knew exactly what was going on and knew exactly what needed to happen. So I'd like to thank the folks at the fairgrounds and the teachers who took such good care of our students at that moment. And also, I want to just give a shout out to the teachers that made that event possible. That event was basically practice, and that it started out as, hey, let's do this for the kids at Hilliard Middle School. And it grew into something that they're teaching kids all over the state to do these contests. So I really, and it's going to be kids that are competing against their kids, but it's about teaching kids. It's like you said, I mean, competition is great when it fosters the child. So I would really like to thank those teachers for going above and beyond for that. And then also, I was fortunate enough to experience our fusion class, our Ag Spanish fusion class at Broadway. They came out to the farm last week for a tour to end up their livestock unit. So I got to see a fusion class firsthand in action. And I can tell that those kids are going to be so much better off knowing Spanish in this environment, because I'm going to be honest, I took 5 years of Spanish in high school. I only got credit for 3 because Spanish is hard. And these kids are learning it in a way that they can relate to. And they learn how to say chicken and cow and I can't do that, but it sure would be helpful if I could. So I would like to thank those who are making fusion classes possible as well. And those are my highlights for the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Do we have high school students here tonight that are here for their government classes? Raise your hands. Welcome, welcome, and we will sign your agendas here shortly as we get through this. But hang around and we'll get that taken care of. We'll move next to action items, COVID mitigation being the first item. Most of you are aware that at the last meeting, we voted by a 3-2 vote to continue masking until February the 28th, at which time it would be reevaluated. I have been in contact with each of my colleagues in one form or another since that time. And our cases, our community spread is a little over half down what it was at that meeting. So we're headed in the right direction. So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I kind of lose track of the time, maybe it was Friday, I made my colleagues aware that I would be putting forth in a motion tonight that if we are out of the red in community transmission, anytime. Pardon me, you had your opportunity to speak. Do not interrupt the meeting, please. If we are out of the red at any point between now and the 18th, that we would automatically go to mask optional. There is legislation that has been passed and will go to the governor if it's not already, and there may be an emergency attachment put to it. We don't know yet when that would become effective, but if that were to become effective prior to us getting out of the red, we would honor and respect that law as we do, so masks would become optional immediately. Upon that, would become optional. Listen, part of the most discouraging part about this is that we allow folks to stand up and talk. And I understand I'm talking about my grandchild too. That is my motion.
I heard you say the 18th?
Yeah.
You mean the 28th?
28th, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Cross.
That's all right.
Can you clarify what out of the red means? I mean, we're down to 37 last I checked, which is below the threshold that Dr. Scheichel's been telling us is high community spread. So could you clarify if that motion's correct, where I'm at now?
The CDC and VDH have 4 categories of community spread. They are low, moderate, substantial, and high. The American Academy of Pediatrics that we had talked about had recommended masks optional when it's low or moderate. Moderate would be the higher of those 2 levels, and the distinction between moderate and substantial is at 50 cases per 100,000 over the course of 7 days. The high level starts at 100. So over the course of 7 days total, you can have 100 cases per 100,000. So Rockingham County has about 82,000 residents, so you have to adjust that. At the last board meeting, the number was 818. As of today, it's 285. So
strategies to keep
them
open. We don't want you.
Point of order.
So
Point of order.
as to Mr. Breeden's motion, red is defined as 100 cases per 100,000 population over 7 days. That's the definition of it.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah. So just to be clear, you're what we're doing, Mr. Breeden, and I'm not in favor of doing this tonight. I'd like to bring forth a motion tonight to make mask optional as well, and I plan to do that here when it's my turn to speak. But what we're doing is we're going to force and be told what to do, you know, and that's my problem with this whole issue is the fact that parents came to us. I actually came to you guys as board members. I wasn't on the board yet, but parents came to you guys back in August and asked, said, "Hey, we want this to be optional." And that's when the governor stood up and said, "Hey, no, you got to follow Senate Bill 1303." And no one questioned that. None of you guys questioned that whatsoever. And so you didn't say, well, you know what, we'll push back. You know, we didn't have, you didn't have any meetings that we saw of, and you didn't push back. You wasn't willing to stand against Governor Northam, you know. But Governor Youngkin comes out and says, hey, we're going to give the power back to the parents to be able to give them the choice to take these masks off your face. And then we're willing to fight back. Then we're willing to lawyer up and say, nah, I think we're going to take this because Senate Bill 1303 it has part of the mitigation strategies that follow the CDC guidelines, and masks are part of it, and that's Senate Bill 1303. So we saw what happened in Senate Bill 1303. At the last meeting, we said, hey, let's let this thing work through the courts. That was the biggest issue on last time. Okay, there were two issues: Senate Bill 1303, and then the constitutional right whether the school board could tell parents whether they could have the power to tell us whether what they're going to do, or we have power to tell them what they should do for their kids. Those were the two arguments, just to be clear. And so really it comes down to this right now. Why don't we make a decision tonight? Why don't we vote tonight saying, what are we going to do? We are. Yeah. We're not making a decision. We're saying, hey, we're gonna follow and continue to see what this new bill does. We're going to continue to see what these cases are happening in the court, and then we'll be told to take the mask off the kids, because this is going to happen. This bill that just went through, it's going to happen. I mean, I know that the Democrats are hoping, praying that when it gets back to the legislators, they're going to have Democrats say, "Oh, I didn't know that it had the governor could add this emergency clause to it." So no, we're not going to do that. No, I think there's a national trend that we're seeing in other liberal states as well, that they're beginning to say, "Hey, it's time to take the mask off kids." And the same way. And so the same way, Dan, that your brother stood up at Spotswood at the 2A meeting and said, you know what, I've had enough of this. Let's just take a meeting tonight. I think that's what you should do as chairman. I think you should say tonight, we're going to take a vote on this. We're not going to wait until the 28th. We're not going to wait to be told what we're going to do. In all actuality, it's in our power to be able to take away the mask if we want to, or we can continue to force parents to make their kids wear a mask. But I tell you tonight, if we end it tonight, you're going to have thousands and thousands of kids tomorrow showing up to school not wearing a mask.
Okay.
And so I think it's time, it's past time that we say we're going to give this a vote tonight, and we're going to make it a vote, not a off ramps, not saying how many caseloads we're going to have. No, it's either we're going to wear a mask or we're not going to wear a mask tonight. That's what should happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other discussion? Any other discussion?
I don't know. I would like to see us pass something that's more opt-out of masks. It recognizes that some kids can't have issues with wearing the masks, and allows the parents to make that decision, and still keeps us the ability to say, your child should wear a mask in schools because spread is high, but allow the parents to choose. But you're also allowing the parents that want their children to wear masks to choose. Because if we go fully optional, I feel like kids whose parents want them, I feel like parents should have the decision. And I, as a parent, should be able to decide that I do want my child to wear a mask. I don't think it should be his classmates' decision. So that's why I would support opting out of mask wearing. That seems like a good compromise for everyone.
Okay,
I would also like to, before we move on, I would like to discuss what our plan is with musicals. We have allowed students to participate in athletics unmasked. I would like the same courtesy to be extended to.
Thank you for bringing it up.
okay. Do you have any clarification on that, Dr. Scheichel? Or we can move toward the vote on this motion and then get that clarification if you would have any.
Sure. So there's an existing health plan in effect, and at this point, the reason that athletics are allowed to participate without masks when they are actively playing is because it is an exception under CDC guidance. And the health plan, obviously, we talked about what would have to change when masks become optional in terms of quarantine, in terms of contact tracing. It's not feasible, and it wouldn't be beneficial to students to say, now we will have to quarantine 600 students based on CDC guidance. That's what I'm saying. It's not feasible, and we wouldn't do that. Governor Youngkin's administration has offered Governor Youngkin's administration has offered new VDH guidance that includes, for example, focusing on positive cases or in cases of outbreaks, which is defined as 3 connected cases over 14 days. So if 3 cases can't be explained reasonably other than the transmission happened at schools, then you go back to contact tracing. In other cases, you would simply focus on just the positive cases, so the isolation. There's not much guidance from BDH on musicals, so we can ask for that, or the board can decide, how you want to handle that.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel, for the explanation. So Chairman Breeden, this basically that comes down to a chair vote, right?
Well, we have to vote on the motion that's on the floor right now.
Absolutely, but we could vote tonight. It's not a superintendent telling us what has to be done. It's actually a board decision to let the kids, and I think it's fair. I mean, I'm not as smart as Dr. Scheichel. Guys, you're an intelligent person. No, he's very, very intelligent. Told him that. But I'm not. It's kind of, you see the kids out on the basketball court and they're running around and they're sweating, they're coughing, they're hollering, coach is hollering, and they're rubbing against each other. But we can't allow the kids to come to the musical and not wear a mask. And so I think it's fair to them. I think it'd be a good decision for the board tonight to allow these kids in musical to take the mask off during their musicals if they'd like to, and be able to do that. So I know we're getting ready to vote on this, but I do appreciate that.
I do want to say one thing to Mr. Cross, and one of the
sure, absolutely.
Mr. Cross, one of the points you made about athletes, and we said this too. It goes beyond that piece that CDC has said when you're actively exercising, there can be an exception, right? There's a voluntary element to sports. So in a classroom, students are required to be there by law, right? And so I think that's why guidance is different for some of these voluntary activities. Students participate in extracurricular activities voluntarily. And so whether that's the musical or athletics, certainly there's a good point to be made. No student has to be there if they decide not to. That's different from the classroom. Absolutely. And so there's certainly plenty of logic behind saying if athletes can participate without masks on, that in a musical that should be possible as well.
Well, let's address that after this motion while we're still under COVID mitigation, if that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Sure. It is my desire that what we accomplish through this motion is that we not wait to be told what to do, but that we recognize that community spread is at a point where we feel comfortable in going optional, and whenever that occurs is okay with me. When that happens, or when such time as law becomes the law of the Commonwealth, we're obligated to uphold it. So
Can I just say one more thing,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, is, what are the numbers of pediatric cases, in our community right now? I know what are those? Do you know those numbers? Because really, that's who I'm representing here tonight. I'm representing the kids, that are in our schools and want to do the best thing for our kids. So, I mean, what are our pediatric numbers of that? Do you know?
I personally do not know.
Because I recently came to the conclusion that we're not doing what's best for kids. We're doing what's best for the community, and I get that. You know, I want the community to be taken care of as well. But my number one job as a school board member is to take care of these kids that we have in our school, over 11,000 children, and so just to go back to what the American Academy of Pediatrics has continued to say, I think we need to hear this tonight on this account, because we're talking about community spread and everything else. But the American Academy of Pediatrics has continued to say, I want you to hear this. The available data indicate that COVID-19 associated hospitalizations and death is uncommon in children. And at this time, it appears that severe illness due to COVID-19 is uncommon among children. And so when we're talking about these mitigation strategies for our public schools, we're looking at over 11,000 plus children that we're looking at to do the right thing for them. And I'll go back to the child psychiatrist that I heard here recently who said this, and this thing has just rang in my soul, Mr. Chairman, since I heard him say this. The child psychiatrist said, for all society, it's always been the parents or the adults who are taking care of the children. And we've never asked children to take care of adults. And so that's what we're doing. We're asking the kids, hey, I know that it's unlikely that you're going to be hospitalized. We know that it's uncommon for you to even die a death of this. You have over a 99% chance if you contract the virus that you're going to die from it. But we're asking you, we're putting the burden back on our children to wear this mask that's not good for them. Teenage suicide is at the all-time high right now in the United States, and that should scare us. That should bother us as a board. And these mitigation strategies with masking and social distancing and quarantining and all these things that we're putting back on the strongest of society, the kids. They are the strongest among us. We're putting the burden for them to carry. And I don't want to hear no more about the community spread and all that. I want to know what the pediatric doctors are saying with the kids and how it affects them, because that's who I'm serving up here. I'm serving the over 11,000 children in Rockingham County. And so we can have all the numbers you want to about community spread and everything else, but I believe our job, Mr. Chairman, is to take care of the children in Rockingham County Public Schools. They are our number one priority to make sure that they're taken care of, and I don't think they're being taken care of the best to our ability by forcing them these mitigation strategies. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Sure.
I know we disagree, but that's important to me.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Can we have the motion read back, please?
Sure. Would you prefer
Dr.
that I
Oliver, do you
restate it,
have it?
Dr. Oliver? Okay.
I have some notes, but if you could read it again.
What,
Mr. Brady.
I don't have it written out, Dr. Aldifer, but my motion is that we would, on February the 28th or sooner, if we get out of the red in terms of community transmission, or if the laws of the Commonwealth would change with regards to masking between now and the 28th, that we would then obey the law of the Commonwealth. And that's the motion. Do you want a roll call vote or do you want a voice vote?
Roll call.
It's fine.
Roll call vote. Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Falk, Dr. McQuilkin,
Aye.
Mr. Breeden,
Aye.
Ms. Lore,
No.
Mr. Cross.
No.
Okay. Motion passes on a 3-2 vote. We were discussing the musicals, and I just say that since that's a voluntary activity as well, I don't have a problem in allowing those kids to be treated the same way as the athletes do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
My son was the only one not wearing a mask, and every other middle school was. So how does
Okay.
Do you need a motion?
I do, yes, ma'am.
I move that we allow musical participation to follow the same guidelines as athletic participation.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any discussion? All those in,
I would suggest that you don't single out musical, but simply extracurricular activities. Because there are other extracurricular activities where that may apply as well.
Well, that means FFA kids don't have to wear them at Stockman's. Is that,
With that?
Yeah,
that
where
would
would
mean
the
FFA
distinction
kids don't
be?
have to wear them at Stockman's.
yeah,
Right, where would the distinction be between voluntary activity involving a musical
right,
and voluntary activity
Right.
involving?
So, that's good.
right. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, say it again.
So-
Jack,
so-
say it again, Jack.
Go ahead.
Just say it again. Just say extracurricular.
So motion fails due to no second. The
Okay.
motion. Here we go again. I move that we allow all extracurricular activities to follow the same guidelines as athletic COVID strategies.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Is there a second?
Yes, I second it.
Thank you, Mr. Cross.
for
Any
saying that.
any further discussion? Okay.
Thank
Would
you. for-
Would you like a voice vote or a roll call, just a roll call vote? Which do you prefer?
Roll call sign.
Roll call, okay. Dr. Alderson?
Dr. McQuilkin,
Aye.
Mr. Breeden,
Aye.
Ms. Lore,
Aye.
Mr. Cross.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. That is 5-0. We will move next to approval of minutes.
Not the right time.
Yeah.
There's the time.
We will move to approval of minutes. There are 2 sets of minutes. We had one meeting that was called to approve some bids for some air handling units that we had to take care of. So we can either move to approve them both together or take them individually, whatever is your pleasure. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of those 2 meetings?
I move that
Together.
we approve the minutes of both meetings.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is 5-0. Thank you. Bills and mileage.
I recommend approval of the bills and mileage for January 2022.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Do I hear a motion in support of the superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Any questions?
Have it publicly displayed on the slideshow what you guys are approving financially?
It's a pretty long list. I think they're public. Yeah, they're pretty. Yeah, there's, yeah, they're public knowledge, are they not? Yeah, right. So, yeah.
Are they available on board docs following the meeting? They should be.
Yeah,
I'd like to see when you approve them though.
should be.
It's a PDF that's like 7 pages long.
Okay. All right, we'll see what we can do on that. Although, any other discussion with regards to bills and mileage? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, field trips.
You have 4 overnight field trips for approval. Broadway High School DECA, March 3 through 6, 47 students to Virginia Beach. Turner Ashby FCCLA, March 31st through April 3rd. 7 students to Virginia Beach, Elkton Middle School, FCCLA, March 31 through April 3rd, 9 students to Virginia Beach, and Wilbur S. Pence Middle School, FCCLA, March 31 to April 3rd, 7 students to Virginia Beach. And I recommend approval of those trips as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Do I hear a motion in that regard? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any discussion?
Yeah, I've got a discussion. I want to be kind of, when we're going on field trips and we're doing this, I want to, it's come to my understanding that we're beginning to ask kids whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And is that true?
Yeah, so for overnight field trips, vaccination status makes a difference in terms of rooming together. So just as we ask students whether they're vaccinated, for example, to exempt them from quarantine, because again, exemption from quarantine can be a recovery from COVID over the last 90 days or being fully vaccinated. So there are areas where vaccinations are part of that mitigation. And so for overnight field trips, students who are fully vaccinated can room together. And so we made a change based on a request from families, especially at the middle school level. As you remember, for the FFA convention, we received a donation from the Shoker Foundation to make sure that students who could not room with others because of the vaccination status would have the difference paid between the room costs. We're also now allowing basically families to have their students participate as day students. So if families want to make that arrangement for the housing, then they can do so because it's not the school division that does it. And so then families that decide to room together, there's no question about vaccination in that scenario.
And to be clear on this again is not a Dr. Scheichel policy, but this is a board policy we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, when we first started, we didn't permit overnight field trips for quite a while. And so as part of the process of creating a protocol, we basically looked at, what we would put in the health plan in terms of overnight field trips, and then there was individual consultation with board members.
So if we wanted to end the asking children if they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, we could, as a board, we could do that. We could make that decision. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I would say that we need to do some checking about what liabilities might be from a parent who
I guess
is rooming with someone who's not, that might potentially be tested positive.
I guess it comes back down to my other question is how does this work with HIPAA? Like and again, I just wanted to know how's this work with HIPAA when we're asking their medical asking for their medical records to see whether they've been vaccinated?
Schools ask for medical information all the time, right? We have a record of everyone's measles vaccination. We have all kinds of records on students. And in fact, in general, those records aren't HIPAA records. They're protected by FERPA. So, and that's different. So the, protections that to data that exist, for example, in a doctor's office, school offices, that's not the same rules. They're protected by FERPA, so we can't release it to someone, but certainly we collect information. For example, I know your son plays baseball, right? All the information you provide on the medical forms there. And so schools collect all kinds of medical information. So that's not a concern on that part. It's a procedural part, to say, that if students room together, that was basically our way of saying, let's have overnight field trips again. And it started with FFA convention, we sent a lot of kids to Indianapolis. And so that's just the protocol that we followed. Certainly, again, some of these protocols are going to change over time, and to have the latest one being, we can't have middle school students, for example, rooming by themselves. That's not an option.
Right.
So we had the other option that families could basically make that decision. If hotel rooms are available, they can make that arrangement. If the hotel block has rooms, we certainly help with it, but it's not the school that is then responsible for that. So those families make those decisions. So there's an option for families who don't want to participate under this protocol.
So that's the part that concerns me too, because if you got the average hotel room is about $125, and So if you break it off and 4 kids staying in one hotel room, they're spending around $32 or so, a little bit more than that with taxes. But when we're separating the vaccinated amongst the unvaccinated now if a kid's on there that he's the only unvaccinated kid, now he's having to spend $125 instead of that 32. Is that correct?
Right, and we don't let middle school students room by themselves. So in that case, it is oftentimes families that, and it's multiple families that work together to have kids that, in the same room. So the cost is
would a high
not
school
typically.
kid though have to do that?
It's
they
not
can-
mandatory, but it's certainly an option, right? We don't just do that at the middle schools, right? So high school families have the same option as middle school family.
Right.
Explain, Dr. Scheichel, why
That-
COVID is more transmissible at night in a hotel room than it is in a school room during the day? I'm curious about that.
Let's, is there other discussion on the field trip?
Just with the field trip, I just would like clarification. Is it still vaccination status or do we allow immunity status? So if they're recovered within 90 days, do we allow that?
That's a good question.
And if not, we should consider updating it, I guess.
No, that's fine. I think, again, vaccination status has been treated in the health plan alongside a recovery with a lab verified test for 90 days. And yes, certainly there's no reason if vaccination status is one of the exemptions for the 90-day immunity to not be part of that. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, many are co-curricular.
Mhm.
It's different from
Yeah.
extracurricular. They're a part of the class that students take.
Okay. Other discussion with regards to field trips? Okay.
No, we haven't voted.
We have a call for question. All those in favor of approval of the field trips, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is 5-0. Health insurance premium, Ms. Mast.
Chairman Breeden, members of the board, and Dr. Scheichel. Our health insurance, we are recommending a health insurance premium for the month of May and November for employees. As you know, we are self-insured, and our health insurance program has been going very well. Our premiums are exceeding what we've been paying out, so as a way of giving back, we would like to have a holiday for employees for May of 2022 and November of 2022.
I do recommend approval of the health insurance premium holiday for employees for the months of May and November 2022.
Thank you. Is there a motion in support of the superintendent's recommendation?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation regarding the holiday for health insurance premiums.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Dorr. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Mast. Approval for committee to review the Ramsey Education Curriculum for Economics and Personal Finance.
So in our econ and personal finance classes, as you know, some really significant life skills are taught. And a local community business, Skyline Roofing, has offered to purchase a Ramsey Education for our high schools to use as a curriculum resource. It's a well-known program. There are 2 tracks. One of them has somewhat of a religious bent. There's also a version of the program that doesn't have the religious components to it. And so Ramsey, they've developed 2 of those tracks. And so one track is being offered to us. Again, it would come at no cost to the school division, but just like we review textbooks, there is a committee that would review these materials to make sure that they're suitable for our econ and personal finance classes. We're excited about the opportunity and certainly grateful for Skyline Roofing to make that available. But as always, we want to have a committee first to review that. And the committee is in front of you in your materials. So it includes Larry Shiflett, Eric Fitzgerald, and then educators from TA, Spotswood, East Rock, and Broadway, and also an East Rock parent. And I recommend approval of this committee.
We want a motion or?
Yes, sir. I'm
recommendation? Yeah,
looking for a motion.
I definitely, thank you for doing that. I mean, one of the classes benefited the most was my econ class in high school and taught me how to manage my checkbook. And you know, as long as this here is appropriate, I've heard a lot of good things about Dave Ramsey. And so, yeah, I'd definitely recommend superintendent's motion to approve the committee to review the Ramsey education curriculum.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Falk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is 5-0. We will move to information items, 2023 school calendar drafts.
You have two drafts. Dr. Shiflett wasn't able to be here tonight. He had provided one draft to you previously. That draft then went to schools, was reviewed in staff committees. It also was made available to parent advisory committees. So there's been a lot of feedback on the draft. And so there are really two options. Again, this is for information at this point, for your review and to provide feedback to Dr. Shiflett about your preferences. And if you look at the two drafts, there's basically a difference between the two drafts in start date. So one actually ends up starting on a Tuesday, but there's a reason for that. One of the pieces of feedback from schools has been that this day that we have in February, where teachers really teach practically all day and then have parent-teacher conference, becomes an incredibly long day. And to split that out into 2 days, there are a number of options. One draft includes an option where it is turned into 2 days. So it's the one early dismissal day or an in-service day, and then the parent-teacher conference day. But that costs us a day. And so in that draft, school starts on a Tuesday. In the other draft, where school starts on a Wednesday, we would handle parent-teacher conference day similarly to how we handle the last workday of the school year, that Saturday. So there would be a time frame, and this may actually help families in terms of, families that have multiple children where they need to attend parent-teacher conference day in multiple buildings, but can't fit it all in. In that scenario, teachers would simply offer there'd be a couple hours every day after school where teachers then would offer and schedule individual conferences with families as they are needed. And so there would be multiple days where that would be offered. And so it spreads out that day over a number of school days. And that's the difference between the two drafts. And I think, again, these are for your review and to provide additional feedback to Dr. Shiflett before he then brings it back for action at a future date.
Thank you. Budget planning for 22-23.
Chairman Breeden, members of the board, and Dr. Scheichel, good evening. We continue to be busy working on the budget. We're in the process of prioritizing the expenditures that we reviewed at our last meeting. However, this evening I would like to review the governor's budget with you that came out in December, and I've also updated the miscellaneous and federal revenues for you. And as you know, we will be getting a copy of the House and Senate version of the revenue in the upcoming weeks, and we will review that too. But our budget then will be set on what is finally adopted by the General Assembly. First, I'd like to point out the ADM and the composite index for 22-23. As you will see, both of those are lower than the current year. The lower ADM results in less state revenue, while the impact of the lower composite index actually increases our state revenue from last year. And that, assuming that all things were equal, that's the impact that each of those would have for state revenues. The first slide that I have up there is the first section of the revenues, and that is our miscellaneous revenue. You can see there's not a lot of change expected in those. The next section is our state revenue, and you'll note that it is about $8.3 million over the current year budget. That is a larger increase in state revenue than we have seen in quite a few years. And you can see the different categories that it is available to us. The third slide shows our federal revenue and the expectation with that. Many of these have corresponding expense lines that you will notice on the sheet that we reviewed last meeting. Many of those at the bottom part there of the federal revenues are revenues that we have received just this year and last for a couple years, and they're tied to specific expenses. You'll also notice that I've kept the local share the same as last year at a little over $68 million. This number and request will be evaluated over the next several weeks, so I've just left that the same. The carryover of state learning funds, those were funds that we received from the state last year that we could use for some positions this year, which we are currently using, but they were one-time funds, so they will not be available next year. I also want to update for you our capital fund. We are going to receive a one-time payment of a little over $4.7 million from the state for fiscal year 22-23 that is to be used in capital projects. So I've updated this, and you'll notice if you compare this to what we looked at last time, it did not have that state revenue in there of the $4.7 million. We will put that for future projects. It allows to go through the fiscal year ending June of 2026. Those funds need to be used up by then. So we will use those in the next couple years for capital projects. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have on this.
Questions, board members, for Ms. Mast?
Was that, you said the capital project, that's 4.7 is coming from the state?
That's correct. That 4.7 is coming from the state. I didn't want to put it in our operating because it is just a one-year
I get you.
influx of money.
Right.
And so I put it in the capital projects. We do have up to 3 years to use that over
Awesome.
for capital things over
Okay.
the next few years.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Mast, would you provide some explanation of how the composite index works
Sure.
to provide people clarity?
Yes, the composite index, let me just look here on my sheet. The composite index in our current year is 37.99. It's going to 36.79. The composite index recognizes how rich your county is or city compared to other places in the state. So what that means is we have to match many of our state funds, and the match for us is 37.99% this year. So that's about 38%. So the state, when they offer 62%, we need to give up 38% for that match. The fact that it's going down, it's looked at every biennium. And so the fact that ours is going down means that compared statewide, Rockingham County, based on their formula, the composite index, Rockingham County has become a little poorer statewide than the rest of the state. That's what does that. And the main components of the composite index are sales tax collected, real estate values, and there's one third thing, and I'm drawing a blank on it right now. But that's what's used when they calculate this composite index through a formula.
So it's a locality's ability to pay.
Yes, correct. It's their ability to pay. The highest in the state is 0.8. There are some that, so they would be considered, they have very high ability to pay. So they're providing 0.8% is coming from the locality and only 20% coming from the state, where ours is reverse of that.
Okay.
We have a higher portion coming from the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yep, Ms. Mast, can you confirm this again when we talk about across-the-board pay raises, that we don't use one-time funds for those?
Correct. So like that would be one reason why that 4.7 million, I did not want it to go into the operating fund, because if that was to be put into there and we were to give raises based on those funds, next year they're not going to be there. We're not going to go in and cut pay or cut positions because of that. It's not sustainable. So that's why I want to be careful that that's not in the operating fund.
And
Does that
also,
answer your question?
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And ESSER3 funds, although we had to provide a health and safety plan to the Department of Education for that, changes that we have made over time to the health and safety plan, they do not impact the ESSER3 funds.
They
so
do not.
as we have made adjustments, it's not really an issue of securing ESSER3 funds or losing those.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Are there specific things that the CARES money that is going to, is there specific things where that money can only go towards?
Yeah, the federal government gave specific guidelines on what those funds could be spent for. Most of those needed to be related, all of them, I guess I should say, really, all of the CARES funds, you had to fill out an application and you had to show what you would be spending it on. And you had to be able to tie it back to COVID some way.
And
Okay.
And so are there, because I've been following stuff that people's been putting out and everything as well, is if we don't do certain mitigation strategies as a county, do we lose that money from the federal? Does that make sense? So if we take away masking, do we
Right.
lose the money from the federal?
We do not.
I think it's like, well, we got 10 million coming back in or something like that.
Right. The ESSER funds, they were not tied to that, no. If the decision for masking changes, that has no effect on this, no.
Oh, okay, that's on the CARES.
On the CARES or ESSER. Mhm.
Okay,
It
all
was
right.
called CARES 1 when it came out, and then the following two, they changed the acronym to ESSER, and some people have referred back to CARES 1 as now ESSER 1, so
So
they're
we're
kind of
not
interchangeable.
Okay, that's good news. So we're not
Yeah.
gonna lose any of that.
We would not
those
lose
funds
any of
if we
that. That
change
is
any
not-
mitigation strategies.
They were not tied to mitigation strategies.
Okay,
No, they were
Okay.
not tied to, you did not have to enforce mitigation strategies to receive the money. You needed to tie how this money was going to be used because of issues you faced with COVID.
okay,
So an example could be buses. We needed to have another bus because we didn't want buses so crowded because we wanted more distancing. That would be an example. Then we could use it for buses. It had to be tied to COVID some way.
gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Mast.
You're welcome.
Board members, you have in your packet of materials a financial review and an attendance report, also an alert on the VSBA Hot Topic Conference coming up March the 11th. If you have interest in participating in that, please let the board clerk know. And we will move to other business. And it sounds like Mr. Cross has some other business, so I'll call on him first.
I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. First, I just have two recommendations for the superintendent, and one is to look into for this coming budget for the next school year, to look into a position for an emergency safety manager for the division. And just to let the board know that this is one of the biggest things to me coming on the board was that I worked almost a decade as a school resource officer, and I was at Spotswood High School during Sandy Hook massacre. And Bob McDonald assembled together a task force to assist the Virginia to find out where we were lacking in Virginia in our safety. And one of the top things that they saw in there was that every division would have an emergency safety manager. And so there are throughout the state there, and I would agree with that finding. And I'll tell you why, because there was a state delegate after Parkland shooting down in Florida that came through the school, and I followed around with them all day long. I went to John Whalen, went over to TA, and I was upset. I felt like it was a photo shoot for the delegate, and my wife saw me on TV on TV3 News that night. She said, "Why do you look so mad?" And I said, "I was mad. I was mad because I feel like they wasn't asking us who works in this every day where are we needing to get better in our safety for our students and children at school." And when Bob McDonald came out with this task force and they identified this emergency manager position, man, it just hit the nail right on the head. And that's there are quite a few divisions throughout the state that did add someone with with a background of first responder background in there, and then there were other divisions like us that we added that to someone else to do. And I think our transportation. Jeremy Mason, he's been doing it for a while. And I told Jeremy, I saw him tonight, I said, when I say this, I'm not saying you've done a bad job. I'm just saying that as a school resource officer for almost 10 years in our schools, I identified a problem that we could get better at. And every single year, just to let you guys know, and it was worked through the sheriff and everything else, but we would have undercover deputies come out and try to find ways to get in the schools. And I remember one time there was a deputy, he was in our school for over an hour, sat next to teachers, looked in the classrooms, and never was asked by any staff, who are you? And that bothers me. And so what the emergency manager would do would be not to get involved with the sheriff's investigations and things like that, but that it would be a liaison between the school division, and that it would also be towards the sheriff's office, to be able to talk with them. And I would ask, when we get to this process, I would ask that it would be someone with a first responder, law enforcement background, and more likely hold a bachelor's degree as well. So it's a very important position. And I would also ask this when you're doing, if you could, and do this, that this position would be a supervisory role, that it wouldn't be one that would just be, because this person's position needs to have some weight when it goes out to the schools. And just by talking to other safety managers throughout the state, I was talking to one at Hampton, and Dr. Shocker said we'll start with. So Hampton City public schools I would recommend you call in and talk with them. And their safety manager, I think his first name was Glenn, but I'll get you that. But he knows quite a few other ones. I know Virginia Beach, they have one as well. And more likely Hampton itself has one, but I'll get you a few of those names you look into. But I would ask that when you do the budget and trying to find out that this position would be a supervisory position for the school division for the safety of our kids. And I think we can all agree on that's what we want. I mean, we really do want that. And when we saw what happened at Bridgewater last week, 2 weeks ago, that really brought this again. If I don't want to do anything else in this board, I want to do this. This is important. So I would recommend, Dr. Scheichel, that you would look into that and bring that back to the board and see what that's going to cost to be in the budget for next school year. And I have one more recommendation, or actually have two more. I would also ask you that if you would come back with the board, Dr. Scheichel, with what it would cost in the budget to put 4 more SROs in the schools. Right now, we have a total of 6 SROs in our schools, and we have 23 schools in Rockingham County that we're over. And so we have 7. One's a supervisory. He's Kevin Dolphenmeyer. He's usually at the sheriff's office, and he's the supervisor over the deputies. Thank you for the deputies that are here tonight. I appreciate y'all coming out. But we have 6 in the school division, and each SRO that's located at your high school, they take care of all the middle schools and the feeder school elementary schools that come into that high school. And so what I'm asking that we would do is that we would at least add 4 more. And it sounds like the governor he's asking that there be an SRO in every school. And so hopefully we'll get some state money sometime. But what I'm asking is that we would take that 4 SROs. They would be a full-time out at the middle schools, and then they would share responsibility with the feeder schools, the elementary schools that go into there, because your SROs not only have court dates, they have training, they have time off, they have to go do research, all kinds of stuff throughout the school year. And one SRO is a lot for 5 schools, and that one SRO has to go by every single school that he's over at least once a week. He has to go check on them. And so that leaves a lot of time him being gone from the high school as well. And so what I'm trying to do is try to keep the SRO at the schools as much as possible, especially our high schools and our middle schools that have the majority of issues or problems we deal with. But I'm not saying that they don't have at the elementary schools, but we're looking at different issues when we're looking at elementary schools when it comes to safety. But I would ask that you look into how much it would cost for 4 more deputies, SROs, for next year in the budget.
Yeah, and we'll certainly get that information, right? Because there's oftentimes shared funding, like you said. We don't quite know yet what Governor Youngkin's going to do in terms of modifications to the budget, because Governor Northam's budget's the one that's currently being discussed. And in terms of the emergency safety manager, you and I talked about which school divisions may be examples of that, and so we'll get information from those and just make that part of the. Obviously, those are conversations among board members, so
absolutely
we'll make that available to everyone for conversation internally during the budget process.
Okay. And to be clear, with as a board, as the middle schools, Montevideo is the only middle school that doesn't have a town presence. And so a response time to Montevideo is going to be a little bit different than what you're going to see from a town presence coming right away. At the active shooter that we had on Bridgewater College, they had the town of Bridgewater responding pretty quick as well there. At Montevideo, more than likely it's going to be a civil deputy maybe around. Hopefully there's a patrol deputy that's around, something like that. But it would be nice to have a deputy there in Montevideo Middle School. I'd like to see one at the other 3 as well, but Montevideo is a big deal having a deputy there as well. And the last thing, recommendation I just ask you tonight, I know I've talked with you about is, and Doug, I don't want you to get mad when I say this because it has nothing to do with you, all right? But I would like to consider Dr. Scheichel of removing the oversight of athletics from Assistant Superintendent Doug Aldifer to Central Office employee Eric Baylor. To be clear, this is not because I think Doug is not capable of overseeing athletics or that he's done a bad job. There's just no one better within the school division to oversee and advocate for athletics than Eric Baylor. If Baylor's position needs to be upgraded to a supervisory position, I'm asking that you would look into that as well, so he could oversee athletics. RCPS coaches have not received a raise in 20 years. And the morale between the coaches and central office is at a all-time low. I want to say thank you to all our coaches, and I'm sorry that you have been overlooked. And I'm here to advocate for you over the next 4 years of my school board term. Assigning Coach Eric Baylor to oversee the first pay raise for coaches in 20 years is only appropriate and the right thing to do. Assigning Coach Baylor to advocate for athletics on an executive level would be a huge gesture to coaches and to the students and parents of Rockingham County. Dr. Scheichel, you have the power to make this happen, and there's no one better to oversee athletics than Eric Baylor. I would compare having Eric Baylor at central office as to having Dick Buckus as one of your parents on your youth football team and not asking him to come oversee the team, or having Tom Brady on your bench with 2 minutes left in the game and you're only down by 1 score. You have Tom Brady or Gus Frerotte. Which one are you going to choose? Again, that's not a dig on Mr. Aldifer. Eric Baylor is just the best in the business and a beloved friend and mentor among RCPS coaches. I humbly ask you tonight, Dr. Scheichel, to consider appointing legendary coach Eric Baylor to oversee athletics in Rockingham County Public Schools. And so that was my last recommendation tonight to you. And I had just a few more things. I would like to move to a motion tonight. My first one, I'd like to move to a motion to make mask optional for students and employees based on 2 discoveries in Virginia since our last board meeting. 1, the Virginia Supreme Court's finding and determination of Senate Bill 1303. And on February 7th, 2022, Virginia Supreme Court stated State law, Senate Bill 1303, gives the school boards a degree of discretion to modify or even forego those strategies as they deem appropriate for their individual circumstances. Therefore, making it clear, Senate Bill 1303 is not a mask mandate law. This was in question on January 24th when we last met. And number two, an upcoming bipartisan bill, Senate Bill 739, ending mask mandates in public schools, has been passed by Virginia Senate. And today, just today, it was passed through the Virginia House of Delegates. The bill now sits on Governor Youngkin's desk, where he will sign it into law and attaching an emergency clause so the bill can become effective immediately. The bill then will need to go back through the House and then to the Senate. Senate Bill 739 will likely be the law of Virginia as early as February 21st. Our neighboring county, Augusta County, has moved to fall in line with the Virginia Supreme Court's finding on Senate Bill 1303, Senate Bill 739, and has changed their policy on mandatory masking for both students and employees. And I'm asking tonight that it be effective. Actually, students and employees at Augusta County on February 14th, they went back to school today without any mask on. I move to make a motion for students tonight and that this will be effective February 15th to make mask optional for both students and employees.
Mr. Cross has made a motion. Is there a second?
You know it's right. You know it's right, Jackie.
I would like to hear an option, not optional, but opt out. So give me your motion. Give me your motion, Matt.
All right, my motion is to make mask optional.
Change the wording from optional to opt out.
What's the difference?
There's a huge difference.
Well,
Opt out.
I understand with opting out, but what we're saying is parents still have the right to send their kids to school with a mask if they want to. And what I'm asking is that we would follow suit, even if there's a mask opt out. I'll say that we can opt out. The parents can opt out either to send their kids to school with a mask or with not, and to make employees make it optional for them as well. That would be my motion. Okay. That there would be, my motion would be that that there would be an opt out for parents for the mask, and that employees would be optional whether they wanted to wear it or not, effective February 15th.
Okay. Okay. You have the clarification on the motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
What do you all hope to gain by keeping kids in masks for a few more days?
I am assuming
The OSHA went to the SCOTUS, and SCOTUS knocked that down.
I think what you're referring to is the vaccine provision, where OSHA proposed a vaccine mandate for all employers with more than 100 or more employees.
Right, you're right.
And the provision would have been that you either have to be vaccinated, or if you're not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. I think what you're referring to is the Department of Labor and Industry.
Yes.
And so that's a regulation in Virginia that's currently under review based on the governor's executive order. So we don't quite know yet where that goes, but even that includes a provision based on vaccination status. And so some school divisions have said that it's based on vaccination status. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. But how closely they are tracking that is a different question. So this is Department of Labor and Industry in Virginia rather than OSHA.
And that Jackie, that was supposed to be back on the governor's desk today. That was executive order number 6 that they were supposed to get back with him on those strategies. It's under his to get Virginia back to work. So, yeah, Augusta County, other counties within the neighboring counties are allowing their employees to go without a mask. It's a mask optional. And I think it's only fair to our employees. There are many that I'm talking to that want to see the mask optional. And it's time to give them that opportunity as well. So.
Okay. Other discussion? If the, we will, there's no further discussion, we'll move to a vote. Do you have a preference, Mr. Cross, as to whether it's voice vote or roll call?
Roll call sign.
Roll call, okay.
Mr. Falk,
No.
Dr. McQuilkin,
No.
Mr. Breeden,
No.
Ms. Lore, Mr. Cross.
Yes.
Okay. Motion is defeated on a 3-2 vote. Do you have other?
Yeah, I have another motion, Mr.
Sure.
Chair.
Sure.
I have a motion. I want to move tonight to make a motion to exempt students who are hearing impaired, who have asthma, who suffer from ADHD, anxiety disorders, who are special needs students, and any student who a licensed doctor deems that it's not practicable for the student to wear a mask while at school effective February 15th, 2022.
Okay. Motion, do I have a second? Hearing none, the motion dies for lack of a second. Now, we will, Ms. Lord?
I've got,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I have another motion. I want to move to make a motion to end contact tracing immediately, effective February 15th, 2022.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion dies for lack of a second.
I have one more. I want to move tonight to make a motion to end any policy whereby Rockingham County Public Schools questions, uncovers, or collects data of the status of students or employees' vaccination status effective February 15th, 2022. So we're not going to collect, we're not going to ask, or we're not going to uncover vaccination statuses of any of our students or employees in Rockingham County Public Schools.
Is there a motion? Is there a second? Hearing none, motion dies for lack of a second. Okay.
Because we're required by law to know some certain vaccinations.
Okay. Okay, look. Ms. Lord, Mr. Cross, do you have anything else?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Lord?
Thoughts in my head. I think they'll just stay there. Who is responsible for these jars? I know, so I'm looking at him. Mr. Fitzgerald, did you provide us with these jars? So it's CTE. It's CTE week. Was that last week? This says week. And, okay, and then counseling is that month? So that was last week. So I was close. Okay, but so happy CTE week, month, and counseling week last year. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McQuilkin? Thank you. Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Dr. Schleicher? Okay. I just had one question as we move towards optional masking. We need to be communicating with Harrisonburg about the tech center and their policy with regards to how that might interconnect. Okay. All right. We do have reason to enter into closed meeting, and I will entertain a motion in that regard at this time.
I move that the board enter a closed meeting to discuss and consider the following pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711, A1, personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individual's assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, or resignation.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McCook. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. We are now in closed meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Appreciate you.